We're joined today by Eric Epstein, founder of Rock the Capital. A recent article that appeared in the Philadelphia Inquirer detailed various second jobs held by state lawmakers, including fitness instructors, landlords, farmers, and attorneys. Your organization, Rock the Capital, has called for changes to Pennsylvania's moonlighting laws.
Right.
Why?
Well, I mean, we need more sunlight and less moonlight. And if you're a full-time legislator, we believe you should be focused full-time on doing your job. Some of these folks not only have one job, but have a second job, a third job, and a fourth job. And I don't know that you have to ban people from having supplemental income, but it's hard to convince me that you're focused on passing laws that are to benefit Pennsylvanians when you're spending a lot of your time benefiting yourself. And, you know, we've also asked for a gift ban. I mean, look, the legislature here, if you come in and you're elected this year, you make $106,000. With your pension and with your health insurance, you're about $130. So it's a good gig. And in Pennsylvania, all you have to do is serve 10 years and you're vested in a pension and you get health care afterwards. So I don't know the reason why you continue to work in other jobs unless, and this is what they do in New Hampshire, which has a citizen legislature, they try to get the skill sets and the perspective from people who 11 months out of the year are working. It's a lot different. These are people that are working and they make a good living. They have per diems. They go to meetings. And I was actually stunned in the article when it was completed after I did my interview at what some folks were doing.
Can you give us some examples of what would pose as a conflict of interest as a supplemental income for a lawmaker?
I think there's maybe three that come to mind. One is, and I'm not saying generically that you can't practice law, but a lot of the law firms that folks are associated with also have a government relations arm, which could present a conflict because government relations is code for lobbying. I think the other is there are folks that invest in Marcellus Shale and also regulate and legislate. So the two are kind of similar. You know, if you're going to be a lawyer and if your firm has government relations and if they're lobbying, that's a potential conflict of interest. If you're invested in Shell, and frankly, a prominent senator, Gene Yaw, is. I mean, a lot of this is folks that, or information that's already been known. I think the third issue is not so much the occupation, but the time you have to spend at the occupation. I think, you know, being a lawyer, there's a conflict. You can get that with the government relations, the same thing with Marcellus Shale. But I think there was one gentleman who had 4 jobs. And so it wasn't the job per se, but how much time are you able to devote to your what should be your primary function as a legislature? By the same token, some of the jobs make absolutely sense. Okay, if you want to be a fireman, that's wonderful. You give to the community, and I'm okay with that. You know, so I'm not saying you can't do anything other than be in the legislature. What we are saying is you have to maintain a focus, you have to maintain a balance, and it's hard to do when you look at some of the jobs these folks are doing. Look, they're only in session 50 days. So, and I know a lot of people say, well, you know, they get a lot done. Not really. You know, they're in session 50 days, and everybody knows. You and I have been around the Capitol for a while. It's June. It's the month of June. You know, everything gets done or doesn't get done on time, and that's the heavy lift. But one of the things people need to look at, there are 3 legislatures that are really well rewarded, New York, California, and Pennsylvania, for pay. But if you look at the total compensation package, we're number 1.
As we consider the potential for supplemental income, would you like to see perhaps a financial threshold or specific job categories that are considered a conflict as opposed to just blanketing everything as a conflict of interest?
Yeah, I think there's a danger to blanketing. And I don't, like I said, you know, there are some jobs, in addition to a fireman or being in security, you know, there's people that are EMTs. You know, there's folks that, like we have a representative now, God bless him, in the legislature who's been deployed to Africa. So I think I'm always reluctant to say, you know, nobody can do anything. And I don't know what the metrics are. You know, if you look at the National Council for Legislatures, there's models there that you can pick and choose from. So I think we could find a hybrid. I don't know how you would enforce it. You know, that's right now the legislature doesn't enforce the rules it's supposed to live by. So, you know, I'm at a loss to say that this is the prescription on how we deal with it. I just think it's a problem where folks are diverted. I don't have a single silver bullet for a remedy.
State Representative Arvind Venkat was quoted in the article as saying that working in public service outside of state government helps them to stay grounded and connected with what's going on in the real world. Your response to that?
You can do that as a volunteer. If you feel like you need to be grounded, you can serve a nonprofit, you can serve your church, you can actually have what nobody's having anymore since COVID. How about having a public meeting? Nobody, the legislature rarely has a public meeting. They're out of touch because they're out of sight. I'm a school board member, so every 2 weeks, we're like political first responders. You want to stay in touch. There are things you can do that don't include compensation.
Are there currently rules within the State House and Senate that prevent a lawmaker from casting a vote on something that could potentially pose a conflict or benefit them personally?
No, I don't think so. I mean, that's a State Ethics Commission issue. I think there's a lot that goes on that essentially you have to be your own arbiter, your own judge, if it's a conflict or not. I see it at the Turnpike Commission all the time. We have one commissioner who recuses himself all the time because he is in a business, insurance business, where there are conflicts. So I think the fact that some folks are conflicted is routine. And I just think the ethical barometer in Pennsylvania is pretty low. Who's going to enforce it? Same thing with open records and sunshine. There's a lot of local governments and state agencies that operate outside of sunshine, and there's no enforcement mechanism.
Are lawmakers currently required to file an ethics report to disclose secondary income?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, yes, you have to. I think all public officials, I don't know what it is for the legislature because I'm a local official, but you do have to file. The depth in which you go into is pretty arbitrary. But my goodness, to be fair to legislatures and actually even judges, there's a number of forms you have to fill out. I find that the form that I have to fill out is pretty minimum.
What happens if a lawmaker fails to file an ethics report?
Well, we attend this, so Rock the Capitol has a project called the ABCs, Authorities, Boards, and Commissions. So we cover all the major authorities, boards, and commissions in Pennsylvania. One that we cover is the State Ethics Commission. And so that occurs when there is a violation for filing. It goes to the State Ethics Commission. At the House and the Senate, they have their own ethics bodies that are totally worthless. So you'll see in the House and in the Senate, there's an even number of people in each ethic committee. They don't announce when their meetings are being held. They don't have any minutes, so it has absolutely no value. I mean, one of the things that we asked for back in 2008, 2009, when Governor Rendell was a special session on integrity. Some of these behaviors should be self-enforced. Everybody knows what's right. Everybody knows what's wrong, and so a lot of folks want to finesse it. Okay, that's on them. That's their conscience. The problem is when you make a decision that rewards you and harms taxpayers, then you have a problem with us.
Are there currently legal boundaries that require lawmakers to separate their personal work from their legislative?
I don't know of any, but it doesn't mean they exist. I mean, I guess back, if you remember Senator Mello, one of the things that legislators used to do that they don't do is they used to rent themselves office space, or they used to hire relatives. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it doesn't happen as much.
Pennsylvania is one of roughly 25 states that allows their lawmakers to work second jobs. Yeah. Are there legislative protocols that you'd like to see perhaps in other states emulated in Pennsylvania that provide guidelines to provide a separation so there isn't a conflict of interest?
Well, I mean, in a perfect world, I think we should have a part-time legislature. That way, this is a non-issue. You can work your day job, your job that informs you on how to pass laws, rather than, I'm serious. I've been doing this for decades. Most legislators, not the staff, because the staff are always there, but most legislators, they're MIA. They're not around. So, and I doubt that a lot of them are out practicing a second craft. My bet would be it's June, July, August when they leave. They're on holiday. They're playing golf. But they're usually not. They may have committee meetings. They're usually not as actively engaged with the community. So in my mind, the scenario that would best work is part-time legislature. You take away the benefits and the pay, the composition of the legislature looks a lot different. And I don't support term limits because if you do, I think the lobbyists and staff have too much power. So I've always thought part-time legislature. Now, I don't think we're going to be as radical as New Hampshire or as efficient as Nebraska, where they have one chamber. But anything we do has to be incremental. If people are thinking we're going to have one big, large, again, a session on integrity would have been great. I don't see it happen. We kind of had that after the pay raise. And it's 20 years now. If you look back on it, there's 2 or 3 substantial changes we made. I think the open records law was great. Penn Watch really, really was helpful. But for the most part, we're back to where we started 20 years ago. And when you talk about behaviors and rules, I think the entire state was aghast that they would pass legislation at 2 o'clock in the morning to give themselves a raise. All those markers that we put out there are gone. They routinely have meetings after 11, which nobody in there could attend. They still operate, in the dark. One of the things COVID did, and some of the legislation and rules have been changed, but they are still operating in a way, when I say they, the legislature, that makes it hard for a regular person to monitor what the hell they're doing.
How do you encourage lawmakers who potentially benefit from having second employment from banning that very thing?
I don't know that I don't think you can ban it. And I think, as I said, there are certainly jobs like fire, police, religious functions that are that enrich the community. And if there's some compensation for the legislature, I get it. I think what we need to have is a compensation commission to look at where we're at. We did that, I think, in the late 60s, where you adjusted pay. I think this is all about money, how much money you make. And even if you're a freshman, so the minimum wage, I think the minimum wage in Pennsylvania hasn't been changed since 2009. The minimum wage is changed every year. Every year legislators get a COLA. Every year, no matter what. So if you're coming in making $106,000, which is almost $50,000 more than a median income, getting Cadillac benefits, getting a pension, how the hell can you personally understand what it's like to be a working person? So what I'm saying is the closer you get to being a working person, the better.
As you mentioned earlier in the interview, you currently serve on the Central Dauphin School Board. How does working in public service affect or influence your awareness and advocacy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I'm an example of why being on the school board is a volunteer job. You don't get any pay. You put a lot of time into it. You have a commitment. Because we're frontline providers, every 2 weeks you have to face the fire. And Francine, more times than not, people come up with really legitimate issues, challenges, and you try to help them, fix them, work it out. And there's also times where people need to vet. I get that as well. But being in public education now is a challenge, and we're on the front line of the culture wars.
The legislature is scheduled to come back into session in mid-September. What are your goals for Rock the Capitol in terms of keeping our elected officials accountable and ethical?
We just continue to do what we do. So in September, Speaker McClinton said early on in the session that she thinks she'll be a lame duck. That's what we're targeting. Nothing. A lame duck session is very dangerous. I think we should get rid of it. It basically allows people who've been defeated or resigning to pass laws. And, that's the Super Bowl of unaccountability. So, there's like 10 days. Look, this is odd. And if you're a political veteran, not much is going to get done because you kind of have a big election coming up. And so everybody will be diverted. What to keep your eyes on is the lame duck. And that would occur likely to occur before they run off to the society dinner in New York. There's just an example. So right after you get a cost of living adjustment, you leave Harrisburg and you go to New York for the Pennsylvania Society team. Great way to merchandise PA. Could you be any more disconnected? So the behaviors and the habits that need to change are not likely to change because people feel that's a perk of the office.
Eric Epstein, thank you for joining us.
Okay, thanks for having me.